Hi, everyone. Happy weekend and happy, gosh, how many days? 10, 11 days till Christmas. I hope everyone's all ready to go for their Christmas stuff. I am. I've got lots of wrapping to do, but otherwise, ready to go. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to see if anyone's going to join us. I can see there's one person in here, so welcome. Welcome back to Daisy Asks, where we try to take an evidence-based look at the Delphi case at the moment. And today I was going to continue to look at more of the science behind some of my ideas around the crime scene. But I'm going to be honest, it's been super heavy looking at all of that stuff. I've just found obviously it's incredibly dark. And I thought maybe we might shift gears a little bit today and then come back around to that. Happy to definitely clarify any points that I've already raised about it. I'm still fairly convinced of the theory around the sticks being mechanical stabilization, and I can obviously explain that in more detail over time. But yeah, I wanted to pivot a little bit today, and it was just an idea that came to me within the last hour, and I thought, you know what, this is probably more a weekend discussion. It's obviously nothing's light when it comes to the Delphi case, but I think this feels a lot less horrific than what we've been talking about over the last few lives. Good morning, Mustang. Or sorry, not morning for you. I'm not sure what time it is. Hey, Hebby, nice to see you. Yeah, so it's not a super structured and planned live today because I have pivoted from what I was initially going to do, but just going to have a bit of a chat and talk through a little bit of timeline stuff today, I think. So if you're interested, stick around. We're going to be talking about timeline, particularly the timeline from the 2 o'clock mark. Hey, Dee, nice to see you. Lots of my faves in here. So we're going to pivot to the timeline a little bit more today. And again, as you all know, if you watch my videos, I take a very layered approach. And so sometimes one layer in isolation can have lots of pieces missing. So I will continue to layer the various parts over the next few lives as well. So there's always a link to follow. What I might do is try and change the thumbnails so that each live that is related to another has a more similar thumbnail and has parts to it. Yeah. Anyway, good to see a few people in here. It is quiet, but please, if anyone else is around, join, subscribe if you want to learn more about the Delphi case from a psychology lens, particularly, but from a science lens. As always, quick disclaimer, this is just discussion and educational purposes. I'm not giving expert opinion. I think I have some good ideas, but of course it doesn't constitute any legal or professional opinion. Hello, everybody. So nice to see lots of my ladies in the house this morning. Welcome. Well, not morning. I don't know why I even say morning. It's not even morning here, guys. Oh, I'm a bit clouded today. So yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put a document on the screen that I literally just got ChatGPT to write for me to summarize, I suppose, a timeline that I started thinking about today. What I'm going to try and do here is to combine the car sightings, my timeline of what I think are my Rick timeline, I suppose, and the video of the private drive and the knowledge C data. So big task. I'm trying to pull all of that stuff together. So bear with me. We're going to go through this potential timeline, and then I'm going to talk to you about how I think that this could potentially be proven or debunked using geofencing data, which of course we don't have. But what we're going to do is we're going to look back at my old live from ages back when I first started doing these long form lives about the geofencing data and what it potentially could show, and link that all together. So it's kind of like a theory, a hypothesis, and then how you would test that hypothesis using actual hard data. Okay, so that was rambly, but welcome, Sean the Brit. Lovely to see you. So yeah, I'm not planned. I'm not organized. I'm pivoting from what I've been really focusing on this week, which has been more the crime scene and the what am I even talking about? The crime. Yes. Oh, hey, Josh. Glad you could join us. Nice to see you. So I've been really focused on the crime scene and the offender profile, and that was what I advertised today's live as being about. Happy to answer any questions that people might have about that, but I'm going to focus a lot more today on timeline and car sightings and geofencing again, because I'm kind of pivoting back to the flawed case against Richard Allen, which kind of is the thread through all of my videos anyway, but really want to kind of look at actionable ways that we can help Rick. So bear with me. Let me pop the document on the screen. Thanks everybody for being here. Um, yeah, I'm Hebby, you're not alone in you can't talk today. I'm like mixing up all my words today. I'm like so all over the place. So apologies, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna go off camera and I'm gonna pull up a document on the screen. So give me a sec. Okay, now bear in mind, like I said, I just got ChatGPT to do this just now. So if there are errors in this document, I apologize. Oh, I just realized I haven't even put it on the screen. Here it is. Okay, so if there are errors, we're going to read through it together and then we're going to look at whether there are particular errors or things that we can improve as we go along. As I always say on this channel, everything I do is kind of working theories, evolving, refining in real time. Okay, so this was something I thought about. So where this came from was I was thinking about the private drive, the car that goes into the private drive at around 2:07, and I was thinking 2:07. I feel like 2:07 is an important time. And I mean, obviously, we know that that's the point at which there's still a photo of Abby where there's nobody in the background. And then just, what is it, 6 minutes later, we see the Bridge Guy video start. So I think around 2:07 is the point at which things start to kick into action. Bridge Guy maybe starts to approach, and we also see this car coming in the private drive at 2:07 and then turning around. And I've heard stories about the private drive having a gate. And I wondered, and I think this has probably been mentioned by others as well, but so nothing new in all of the sort of bits and pieces of all of this, but I guess it's what I'm trying to do is tie it all together. I wondered if the 2:07 car is the actual offender. So by now, a lot of you will know that my take on the offender is that it is somebody with a long history of sadism, basically a pervasive personality style, I suppose, of sadism. But I don't believe it's just one offender. I think it's one main offender. And I think that there are other people involved who, I mean, what's the word? They're kind of coerced by that person, but are also kind of part of that person's network. They may not be the main offender. They may not even be directly involved in the actual physical act of murder, but I think that they were all part of this sort of coordinated plan. I've always believed that this is a planned offense. I do believe that whoever went there that day was waiting for those two particular girls. And so my theory here is that Bridge Guy is not the offender, but that Bridge Guy is involved. And obviously anyone who watches my channel knows I don't believe that Bridge Guy is Richard Allen. So my thoughts here is that somebody is kind of a lookout, and that's the old car at the CPS. And that person is a bit of a lookout. We've got somebody who is in phone contact with the girls, knowing when they're arriving. And that's my opinion based on the Snapchat message at 1:51, the video message that they send in response to a notification. And then I believe that the girls start to cross the bridge at 2:07. Sorry, not at 2:07, at around 2 o'clock, 2:05, I think is a time frame that they're on the bridge, kind of at the starting end. And that old bridge guy, the bridge guy that we see in the video, then approaches from behind and traps the girls on the south end of the bridge. Now, what dictates what time he does that, because according to Betsy Blair and according to the sightings of Bridge Guy by the four girls, by Brie and Rayleigh in particular, we would expect Bridge Guy's already there. He's already on the first platform. And my theory around that is that the person waiting on the first platform there is young Bridge Guy, the person that the girls are communicating with via Snapchat. And I have posited that young Bridge Guy leaves at around the 207, 208 mark. He either goes down the south end, down the hill and disappears, or he runs or moves back to the north end and leaves. I believe he's a lure. He's somebody who's lured the girls in, and then old Bridge Guy decides to show himself at around 207, 208, and he then is the final trap of the girls and takes them down the hill. So now we've got somebody at the CPS parked there, not the small car parked at the CPS, but the old style car parked on the road. So we've got someone driving that. We've got young Bridge Guy, old Bridge Guy. And then I think we've got the true offender. I don't think any of those three people are the offender. I think they are people who are offenders because they are part of the coordinated plan. But I don't think that they're the true offender. So here's my theory. Is the true offender the person in the car that is meant to meet them on the private drive? Is he meant to meet them on the private drive and pick the girls up, to take the girls somewhere, to take them somewhere that he can then engage in whatever horrendous, sadistic ideas that he has? And when he's blocked from the private drive, he has to recalibrate, regroup, and think of an alternate plan. Now, one of the things we know is that there are no phones within the crime scene during the time of the crime, other than those three unknown initially phones that ping in that area that are not related to this. So they are just random pings of probably people, driving by at the cemetery, walking around. They're not the offenders. And so to me, that means that the phones are off. The offender's phone or the offenders' phones are off. They're not actually on during the time of the crime. So if the person intended to go down the private drive and meet with Bridge Guy and the girls, but then was thwarted because there was a gate there that was closed, that would explain why that car goes in and out quite quickly, right? And then what we would expect potentially then is, what's another access point to the crime scene that you can drive to? The only other way to get to the crime scene that you can drive to, other than the Mears and walking across the bridge, which we know doesn't happen because there are people on the bridge then, at those later times and nobody's seen. But the cemetery would be the next reasonable spot, right, to go undetected to the crime scene. So I wonder if that person then drives to the cemetery, parks at the cemetery, and then walks down to the creek, crosses the creek and meets Bridge Guy and the girls there. And then because they can't take the girls to the car, they recalibrate the plan and the offender commits the most horrendous, horrific acts that he does over the creek in a secluded spot. So I don't know if you guys followed that, because I was just thinking out loud. Let's read through the document that I've started and let's see what you guys think. Now, I will come back to the chat later. I know Hebby's in the chat. And Dita's in the chat, two of the mods in there. So, yes, by all means, I will come back and have a look. I'm kind of briefly looking at it as I'm talking, but I may miss some points to begin with, and I may miss some new people coming in too. Okay, so let's get this document on my screen. Okay, so we all know that at about 1:49 is when the girls are dropped off at the trails and they begin to walk towards the bridge. And we know that Betsy Blair at this point has seen somebody, a male, who she sort of describes as younger. She's the person who it's not Drew, but is responsible for the young Bridge Guy sketch, right? I always forget who's responsible for which, but I'm pretty sure that's Betsy Blair's sketch. And basically that means that person is on trestle 1. So unless he then jumps off trestle one and goes down the side little paths that kind of people have gone down to get down to the creek, which is possible, I suppose. But why? Because he's actively looking up at the first trestle when Betsy Blair's there, and about 2 minutes later, the girls come. So there wouldn't really be a reason to jump off that and hide now that Betsy Blair's seen him. So this is why I've always felt that that person is actually the person that the girls are meeting. Now, I know people are saying, well, where's Old Bridge Guy come from? Well, he's potentially the one that is somewhere hidden in the, oh gosh, I mean, I know that sounds silly, hidden. I get it sounds silly, but we're talking about a woods here, a trail system here, where there are lots of pockets and lots of entry points on foot. So I wonder if Old Bridge Guy is around and he's kind of lurking. Now, the girls meet young bridge guy and they start to go across the bridge, and we see that final Snapchat photo of Abby on the bridge, and in that photo we see nobody, and we don't see any indication on Abby's face that she's concerned or worried. She looks pretty routine, kind of relaxed, not overly happy, not sad. It just looks like a pose on the bridge. Now, in order to understand Rick Allen exit point, I'm going to have to go back over my timeline, and some of you may remember it, some of you won't, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But according to my timeline, I believe that Rick exits the trails around the 2 o'clock to 2:05 mark. And the reason for that is that Rick says he sees 2 cars parked at the Mears entrance as he gets up to leave. Now, the only time that the 2 cars are parked at the Mears entrance during that time frame, and those cars are a sedan and an SUV, is when Kelsey German has pulled up and Betsy Blair's car is parked there. So to me, that's indicative of around the 1:49 mark. So if you time 1:49 at the trail split, it would basically be the equivalent of him getting back to his car if parked at the CPS slot, or even if parked at Old Camden Road. But I believe he does park at the CPS slot at around 2 o'clock to 2:05. Okay, so this would then be the time that the last male, the only male on the trails, leaves the trails. So for the lookout, to me, this would be the red light signal to say, we're on, let's go, because now the trail is clear. Yes, there's Betsy Blair, but, she's walking possibly in her own little world, because, I do feel that Betsy Blair does miss sightings and things like that on the trails. Maybe she's got headphones in. I mean, when you're doing that much walking, I'm going to guess you do. I'm guessing she's listening to music. So they're probably less concerned about Betsy Blair. They'd be more concerned about Rick Allen being there. Just seems to coincide just a little too well, right? So the vehicle at that point gets the green light to go and may attempt to access the private drive. That's it. All systems go. We've got the girls contained on the bridge. Let's do it. This is our window, because we know there's only a very tight window. Okay. And that would mean that bridge guy then gets onto the bridge and walks across. It is very doable for him to do that in 5 minutes to get to the point where he's at. That bridge doesn't take that long to walk across if you're confident. If you watch, I believe Rick Snay has a video where he walks across the bridge, and there's lots of other people who walk across that bridge, and you can navigate that bridge within a matter of, I think it's about 6 or 8 minutes. So it's not that unlikely that bridge guy could have got across the bridge in that time. So we then have the guys down the hill, as we all know that, and the girls are led off the bridge. But they don't cross the creek yet. So now if we look at the Knowledge C data, which I've gone through at length, so of course you can always go back and watch the Knowledge C data videos that I've done. I won't go too much into it now, because we've done that to the nth degree. But we know that there is this time frame between 2:18 and 2:25 when the phone just doesn't move. This is with the cold shock theory. This is a time at which we believe that the phone stops movement and possibly is sitting on the ground, because essentially the heat from the cold seems to start to have an impact within the next couple of minutes, and the battery drops. But there is no movement during that period either. So we know we've got this sort of 7-minute pause. What's going on in the 7-minute pause? And I've hypothesized so many things. So as I said to you before at the beginning of this video, if you watch any of my videos, you'll always see that there's an evolution and a refinement of ideas. So sometimes something I might have said in the first video about the topic might evolve into something different over time. And so for me, I think that the 7-minute pause now isn't that water has impacted the phone or that the cold shock has stopped movement tracking. I don't believe that's a period when they're crossing the creek. I initially did. I believe that's a period where the girls are stationary with that phone. If they simply drop the phone and then find it again 7 minutes later, to me that's less likely. We've all seen the phone in the leaves. I don't think that would be really easy to spot in a panic situation. So I think what's maybe more likely is that the girls do actually sit on the ground. Maybe they're forced to sit and to wait because maybe the person who was expected to be at the private drive at that point is not there. Now, if the person's not there, and if the person who has them there, the bridge guy, has not got an active phone on, they can't coordinate with each other. He wouldn't actually know what's going on, and he would be a bit stumped as to what to do, because if the original plan was for the girls and him to get in the car and to be driven off somewhere, he's going to be a little bit spooked at this point. What do I do? There's no one here. One cog in the plan has completely been missing, and it's probably the offender. And so in that time frame, there doesn't appear to be any major struggle. There are no defensive wounds, and there's no crossing of the creek yet. So my sense was, is the main offender still en route? He's had to back out of that private drive, and it would take about 4 to 6 minutes, according to my calculations, and I'm absolutely happy to be proven wrong. I haven't had a lot of time to actually explore this, so I will watch some videos of other people who've driven around that area, and we can time it exactly. But I wonder how long it takes to get from the private drive, I think it's the Sandifers property, all the way back to the Morning Heights Cemetery, and I think that would be about 4 to 6 minutes. Maybe parks the car at the cemetery or somewhere hidden around that area and goes on foot to around the crime scene area across the creek and meets Bridge Guy and the girls. And at that point, we know movement starts again. We see this sort of choppy movement that could be consistent with crossing the creek. And by 2:32, there's indications that the crime is already underway. So at that point, I think it would make it much harder for the girls to be contained in a car and driven away, potentially. Now we've got other people arriving at the trails. We know that the next person to arrive at the trails, I believe, is around 2:30, the next male, and that is David Riley. He's got his big truck, he's got his big dog. Are they really going to risk then having somebody see them trying to leave with girls screaming in a car? And so instead, he improvises and he enacts this horrendous evil act quite quickly at the crime scene and then leaves unnoticed. So I know this is super speculative. I'm not saying this is exactly what happened and that I know. Of course, I don't know. I wasn't there. But to me, it feels consistent with that private drive car and what the purpose of it was. I think some of us had speculated before that maybe that car was dropping someone off. And that's another possibility. I mean, maybe there's somebody waiting down the end of the private drive. I suppose we don't see anyone in the Bridge Guy video, but that doesn't mean we're seeing the entire length of that private drive. So that is another option, that the offender is dropped there and is waiting and then gets picked up later from the cemetery. That's certainly a possibility as well. But this was just something that helped me to kind of figure out, well, what's going on? Why is there this 7-minute pause? What's happening in that period where they are still on the other side of the creek? And I always forget which is north and south with this. So I think I'm not even going to try to say, but they're on the south side of the bridge before they've crossed the creek, and it seems like they're there for 7 minutes. Now, we know the state's theory is that that's Rick having abducted the girls, stripping them and trying to assault them. And first of all, I mean, it's an absurd theory when we think of criminology and forensic psychology, and I can talk about that more at length again soon, but it's not really consistent with the crime scene. It's also not consistent with known patterns of offender behaviour. But Also, I believe it's quite clear that the girls are wearing some of their clothes as they're crossing the creek. So I don't think they're stripped naked at this point either. So instead, what seems consistent here is if the phone is not moving, we get this red movement stopped. That means the phone has literally stopped, because anyone who's looked at the Knowledge C data or has gone through it with me knows that movement rarely stops blank unless literally the phone is placed on a surface and it is not moving at all. As long as the girls are even standing and dawdling, movement seems to continue to be somewhat logged, same as when they're in the car. So to me, this is suggestive of it literally maybe being placed on the ground underneath her or something like that. But I think that this is Libby doing it. I don't think it's the offender doing it. And I think the whole point here is that something stops them for 7 minutes, and that's not a sexual assault or taking your clothes off. I suppose I know some people would say, well, it could be taking the clothes off because it could be putting the phone down while she takes her clothes off. Potentially, maybe she takes the jumper off. Maybe that is part of what happens at that point, but I don't think it's part of the actual story that Dr. Wala has obtained from Rick while he is in a decompensated state. Okay, so I'm going to go to the chat now because I've just sort of done a bit of a monologue there for the last little bit. And I want to say hello to everybody. Hi, Criminal Network. Really, really nice to see you. Your jokes are often very funny, Criminal Network. You always make me laugh. Hey, Digital, haven't seen you for a while. Love to see you in here. One of our amazing commenters. Who else have we got in here that I haven't said hello to? Chester, hello. Hey, Mark, nice to see you as well. Have I missed other people as they've come in? Unindicted, lovely to see you too. Four Pits, great to see you. Sorry if I've missed anybody. I think that's everyone I can see in the chat. So good to see you guys. Oh, Critter Mama. Hi, Critter Mama. Nice to see you. We're going to get into geofencing. So Critter Mama's fog data science that I keep promising to do a video on. We're going to talk a little bit about that too today, Critter Mama. So I don't know, guys. What do you think? Any ideas? Like, obviously, I'm not suggesting that this theory is absolutely definitely it, because the only one who could say that would be somebody who had all of the little pieces of data that corroborated or who was actually there. Yeah, Critter Mama, you often miss my lives, but I love to see your comments after the show, so really nice to see you in here. So anyone who's just joined, so long story short, what I'm suggesting is that maybe the car trying to enter the private drive at 2:07 is indeed one of the perpetrators, maybe the main perpetrator, and the initial intent is to collect the girls and take them in the car. However, that's thwarted by the gate that apparently exists there. Hey, French, nice to see you. You're cool and groovy. Awesome. I wonder if that was the intent, but it gets thwarted, and that explains why Bridge Guy gets the girls to, down the hill and near the creek, but doesn't cross the creek for 7 minutes, because essentially he doesn't know what to do. The plan hasn't gone according to what they had all discussed, and so as a result of that, he has to wait and see, because they can't actually communicate with each other, because there are no phones that are active in that area at that time. So they've either left phones at home, or I think more likely put phones into airplane mode. So we're going to get to phones in a minute, because phones, I think, is the way that we could actually see whether this stands the test of data. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But yeah, I mean, so the person driving that car doesn't necessarily have to be the offender. It could be somebody who's the getaway car too, and that could actually explain why maybe they then drop the offender at the cemetery rather than being parked there. I mean, there's all sorts of there's all possibilities here. Like, I guess this is just a rough theory. It's obviously not something that we could say is certain in by any account, but I think, when we look at the map and we look at the different sightings of cars and we look at the phone data for Libby's phone, I mean, I just need to make sense of that 7 minutes, because I don't believe that 7 minutes is Rick Allen fumbling around with the girls, having them, take their clothes off, because first of all, that's just not in line with any offender profile, an impulsive sexual offender doesn't usually take two victims in broad daylight, and an impulsive sexual offender absolutely doesn't stage bodies then and go to the effort of posing bodies, which I do believe is done here. So, and Rick doesn't match any of those offender profiles. So, we've got so many reasons to suggest that Rick's um, alleged confession to Dr. Wala really doesn't add up with any of the data, right? And they've really tried to stretch the data to fit him into this by saying, well, that's just 7 minutes, and then this is what happens, and then that's what happens. I mean, realistically, if you're scared of being caught and trying to save yourself from being in trouble with the police, you don't cross girls over a creek and then not only kill them not using the fastest means, i.e. your gun, but kill them brutally, allow them to be alive for a few minutes before they die, and then drag and stage the bodies in a way that does not align with concealment. So, okay, so that's the first part, guys. So that's my new theory. I'll keep working on it, and we'll keep kind of trying to fine tune it. It's a little bit tricky because it's one that I can't prove, of course, because basically the data that you would need to prove this is probably contained within discovery, but we obviously don't have it. So it's really tricky to prove it once and for all, of course. Which is why at the moment we can only put it in the speculative category. But essentially, I think it's logical. I think it makes sense. And I think it's at least a starting point. And I think that whoever has the discovery, so Rick's lawyers, could absolutely use the discovery to figure out whether this is even a plausible suggestion. And so we're going to talk about how we can do that. And then we're going to watch my old geofencing video. So if any of you've already watched it, apologies. We're going to go through it again, but this time with me actually being in the chat more, because I'm not actually doing the video, and also with us pausing it and stopping it and talking about, any new observations we've had, because that was done like a couple of months ago now. Oh, hey, Nicole. Nice to see you. Another mod in here. Really good to see you. Yeah, you know what? I would love to get my hands on the geofencing data. I mean, I think we could even work with the anonymized stage 1 data here, and I'm going to explain why in a minute, but goodness, I would love to have a look at that data because I think it would be so informative. There is so much we can get from geofencing data. So without further ado, let's look at geofencing data. Give me one sec, guys. I'm going to pull up YouTube and I'm going to play my own video back, and I'll be in the chat then and we can chat properly. So give me one sec to do that. Chat amongst yourselves. Really appreciate everyone being here. Amazing. We can do some polls now too, because I'll be hands-free, not talking anymore. So give me a second to put the YouTube up. One sec. Okay, here we go, guys. This was 3 months ago. So some of you may have watched it, but some of you may be new to my channel and may not have seen it. So we'll go through it again and see how it might be relevant. So give me a sec. anyone talking back to me. So it's really strange. If anyone wants to join me, you are welcome to. I hate having to just talk to myself. So I've never done a live with a presentation before. So bear with me, guys. I'm going to try and make sure that I get the slides moving and I read the chat and I keep some level of organization too. Thanks for joining me, guys. I know there's a few of you guys already in here. I know that Rick Snay is still on his live, so I imagine a lot of people are still there, but it might get started anyway, and then people can always watch on the replay. So today I've got a fairly organized live because we're going to talk about something that I think is massive in the case against Richard Allen. I think that there is data that can blow open this case. And I'm so excited about the data that I've been looking at. So just to start off, we'll do a disclaimer while we're also waiting for some others to join. I am clearly not a digital expert or a digital forensic expert. You can probably tell from the way that I'm struggling to even manage this live stream. I don't have any qualifications or training or experience in digital forensics. I'm also not a legal professional either. And so any of the information that I offer today is just from my own research at home. What I am... Sorry, guys. I'm going to try and skip some of the disclaimer stuff. Give me a sec. Information in a way that's easy to digest. So a lot of my job as a ClinPsych is to do what we call psychoeducation. And what that means is we try to, and it seems like to read the chat consistently just because otherwise, and tower dumps. Rick's phone and his does form a really good basis for an appellate issue, the digital forensic data. And one of the hypotheses that I had about why Rick Allen was cleared back in 2017 was that they probably cleared him on the basis of his phone data. And the reason I thought that was because of the fact that they went to the lengths of removing the battery to get the phone identifier information for Rick Allen back in 2017. So to me, that indicated they were using those phone identifiers to link people to various digital information that they had around the crime scene and the crime window. It would also be a very, very clear path to ruling people in and out, because essentially if their stories matched up with the phone data that was showing on the tower dumps and geofencing, then we could be fairly conclusive that they were telling the truth and that they weren't at the scene of the crime. Now, I know that there is some debate about how conclusive phone tracing, I guess, tracking is, but realistically, I think that in a case of kind of ruling out suspects, goodness, I'm already losing my words. In the case of like looking at witness statements and marrying them up with the digital data, I think you could get very clear pictures of people's movements, particularly in the area of the trails, which wasn't an area where there were hundreds of people. We're not talking Times Square in New York City. And so on the trails that day, in that time window, there weren't copious amounts of people. I think it would be quite clear that you would be able to see that devices pinging together may have been the groups of people, and you would see at least a sort of gist of the person's movement that day. Now, because Rick Allen was there alone, they would not have been able to corroborate his story with a witness who was there with him. He didn't see anyone that he knew. As opposed to people like Cheyenne Mills and Brie Wilbur and the Shelbys, I always forget which one's which, and Daniel Pearson, who all had someone else with them, at least part of the time. Rick Allen didn't have anyone with him, and he didn't see or wasn't seen by anyone. And so the phone data would have been a really, really good way to pretty convincingly determine whether Rick Allen's story about leaving the trails before the crime held up to the evidence.
I believe that's why they cleared him, and that's why they didn't go back to him again, because he wasn't a particularly useful witness to them. He didn't see anything, and he left before the crime. So this is why I've always been so fixated on the IMEI, me stuff, where I've been really quite fixated on the geofencing, because I think that it would have the power to provide exculpatory evidence. And the exciting thing about that is that that information is still available. Initially, I was worried because I thought, well, it's been more than 5 years. It's now been 7 years, but so maybe too late because, phone records don't last that long. But now that we know for a fact that tower dumps were done and that they were in Discovery, that's already one line of information. And then we also know for a fact that there is some stage 1 geofencing data, if not stage 2 and 3. So there is definitely information available, most likely already in Discovery, that could trace Rick's movements and may prove to be at least part of the case for exonerating this man. This is why I'm so excited. So I'm talking already about tower dumps and geofencing. Let's get into what they actually are, because if you're anything like me, you had no idea what they are. I literally have learned all of this in the last several weeks, to be honest. I knew nothing about this going in. So let's see if I can try and explain it to you. Okay, so the agenda today, we're going to talk about tower dumps. Gosh, I feel like a lecturer here, guys. I'm not, clearly. So tower dumps, geofencing, cast, Cheyenne Mills, and appellate relevance, and kind of go-to steps from here. Now, again, I am not an expert. I am not trying to say that I have it all figured out, but I do think that I have threaded together a lot of information that forms a pretty coherent narrative that I think is worthy of exploration for sure. The reason that I have this agenda and the PowerPoint, by the way, guys, is just to keep me organized. It's not about me trying to be a teacher here. This is not about me trying to think that I'm an expert educating everybody today. It's more about a discussion. But for me, as somebody who goes off on 700 tangents, a brain that just can't sit still for very long, I thought it would be better for me to have some slides to kind of keep me on track as well. Okay, so let's actually get started. So tower dump data. Now, law enforcement did request cell tower dumps in 2017. These were provided in Discovery. So what does a tower dump record show us? Well, carrier records for all devices connected to a tower sector at specific times is what is obtained in a tower dump. So the info would include timestamps, device ID, activity type, so whether someone is calling, texting, using data, and it would also provide which tower that they are pinging off, as well as sector ID. So sector ID, interestingly, and this is something I've learned, is each tower is divided into sectors. You can see in the picture here. Now, sometimes these sectors can be, I believe, 6 or 8 even, maybe, I'm not sure. But in the case of more rural areas, I believe that a lot of the time the sectors may only be divided into 3, so at 120-degree angles from each other. And so basically, if they are doing a dump on this tower in this picture here, it would be able to tell us that it was pinging off that tower and which of those sectors it was pinging off at various points. Now, there are lots of pings apparently that occur over time. So your device will ping when you're on a call, it will ping when it changes sectors or bounces off different towers. It will ping when even when background syncing is occurring, when there's movement around. There's various ways that it can. And again, I might be mixing things up a little bit there, so feel free to correct me, but I think that's the overall sense of this data. So it's going to provide copious data. Even if you only had 20 phones pinging off a tower, you're going to have 20 phones and all of their timestamps over a course of the period that you've requested a tower dump for. So I have no doubt that the tower dump data provided in Discovery is massive. It's a huge, huge file, right? But that doesn't have to be problematic when it comes to tracing a phone where we have the known device ID. So hold that in mind, because we do have the known device ID for Rick Allen. We have the Mead hex number. So we'll come back to that, but this is why the tower dump data could absolutely be sort of searched in order to find all the pings for Rick's phone. Okay, so let's look at cell towers in Delphi. As far as I'm aware, there are only 2 known towers in Delphi. And from the searches that I've done, they are located in the following areas. So I got ChatGPT, my best buddy, to plot the location of the towers in relation to the Monon High Bridge and the crime scene and Rick's home. And it's really hard to tell, but they potentially are covered by the same cell tower, the Wells Tower. Whether they're covered by the same sector or not is also hard to tell. We kind of calculated a rough sort of angle arc, I suppose, from the tower for Rick's house, his address at Whiteman Drive, and the crime scene, and I got a difference of about 108 degrees. So it could be within the same sector if the sector lines just happen to be at those 2 spots. But it's quite likely that it's not. It's quite likely that it could actually be in two different sectors. Additionally, if you look at the map and the direction that Rick would need to go between his house and the bridge, he potentially again would ping off the other tower or other sectors as he was driving to and from the trails that day. So we may even see him switch sectors. So now, obviously, if we can see a phone switching sectors or towers, this is a pretty good indication that the phone is moving around. And that could be quite a potential way of tracking, again, when Rick went to and left the trails that day. It's not 100% accurate. There'd certainly be a degree of doubt in the certainty of it. However, it could still give us a general gist of movement. But there's more than that. There's more information that we can get than just which tower and sector was he pinging off at each time period. So just another slide here where you can have a look at, this is the plotting of the 2 towers in relation to Rick's home and the Monon High Bridge. So you can see they probably both covered by the singular tower, which is the Wells Tower. So the chances are he potentially would be in that same area throughout the duration of the crime. But whether they're in the same sector is hard to tell. As you can see, the angle there, if these were both on the edge of the sector, potentially it's the same sector. But if, let's say, the sector were across like this, then they'd be in different sectors. And that could be incredibly useful if that is the case. I don't know what the sectors are for the towers. Don't know how you figure that out. I'm pretty sure it's not widely available to the general public. So, yeah. But we do know is that law enforcement, that forensic experts digital experts would be able to obtain that data and figure that out. Okay, so I did allude, though, to there being more that we can get from the tower dump than just the location. So we've got movement between sectors and towers that can give overall pattern. It isn't GPS coordinates, so I'm not suggesting that that's going to completely track Rick Allen's movements like a little, I don't know, I'm thinking of like a microchip or something. So, but it could give a rough indication of movement. But there's also what we call, what we've kind of named here, behavioral timeline value. Because those tower pings provide information about whether it's a call, a text, data sessions, and idle, keep alive, so background syncs, you could actually map that to show what the phone was doing. So, for example, if someone's having a long data session, it's likely that they are manually using the phone on an app, like checking stocks. If you're getting short, infrequent blips, then it's likely background sync, which suggests that the phone is idle. If there's no activity at all, it's not pinging, then that would indicate that the phone was off, out of range, in aeroplane mode. So this would actually really help investigators and the defense to reconstruct a behavioral timeline during the crime window. So they'd be able to actually, again, looking at the pings of Rick's phone over the course of that day, February the 13th, they'd be able to sort of have a rough idea of how he was using his phone during the day, when it was off, when it was on, when it was in range or out of range. And there'd be still obviously not 100% clarity, but it would probably, again, create quite a good picture of what was going on for Rick on that day. So that's I think we're about to go into geofencing. I guess I just want to stop for a minute. I know there's not lots of people in here, but there are a few of my lovely loyal people who've come to see what I have to say today. Any questions, comments so far? Any thoughts about what we've discussed so far? I'm just looking through the chat to see, but I don't think so. I got my faithful mods here having a nice chat. So I might just keep going then. And so now we're going to geofencing data. Now, most people, when I raise geofencing data, say, well, geofencing data was suppressed. And it was, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's, I've just gone back a slide. But let's look at it. Let's see what it would actually provide. We know that there is some geofencing data in Discovery. I believe stage 1 geofencing data that was obtained in 2019. That would be still incredibly useful for Rick's team to look at, to again decipher where Rick's phone was, what it was doing during that key window. So what does geofencing do? Well, it's basically law enforcement can request geofencing data from Google, and it's basically asking which devices are inside a particular circle at this time. So what they would have probably done is they would have determined a sort of area around the crime scene and the trails that day that they wanted to kind of look into further and know which devices, or how many devices initially, because it's anonymous in stage 1, how many devices were showing up in that area that day. So, obviously it's going to be important to know who and what devices were around the crime scene area and the trails between particularly probably 12 and 5 p.m. And so in order for a phone to show up in geofencing, though, it does need to be signed in to a Google account. It needs to have location services enabled, and the device needs to be actively sharing data. Now, in 2017, most people had smartphones. Most people had Google accounts. But most of us also were not in the habit of switching off all location services. So realistically, if you were walking the trails that day with a smartphone, you would ping and show up in the geofencing data. So we know that in 2019, there was a geofencing warrant. It was discussed in the hearings pre-trial from the 30th to the 1st of August. I don't remember the exact days, but it shows up in those hearings. I believe that's to do with the motion in limine. So if you want to have a look there, you can see Jennifer Roget basically arguing for more access to more information around this, and also for the relevance in terms of Rick's defense. And we hear McClelland wanting this suppressed. We'll talk a little bit more about interpretations of this over time. Just going to start off by giving you the skeleton, and then we'll go into my potential interpretations of this. Okay, so practical reality check, because, and this I put in here because someone could say, well, Rick may have turned off location services. Look, he may have. It's highly unlikely, though. They were a default for Android smartphones. We believe that Rick has been an Android user. Yay, go Android users. Anyone using Chrome, Gmail, stock apps would almost certainly have location services running. Very few average users knew how or why to turn it off. So Rick owned most likely an Android smartphone. He indicated that he was checking stocks, so clearly he had a phone that was internet capable. 2017 was well beyond the time where we all started to have, iPhones and Androids and phones that connected to the internet, had apps, had Google accounts. So yeah, and he noted that he was looking at a stock ticker on the trail. So his phone should be captured in the geofencing data from that period. I'm going to guess that they didn't just cast a net around the crime scene itself, but around the entire trails. And so, given that Rick said that he did go to the trails that day, and the fencing warrant, I believe, was from around 12-ish, 12:30-ish to 5, then there's no reason that Rick should not be showing up at some point in that, because that's his own statement. He was at the trails that day. So potentially, again, we've got information here that could show us Rick was on the trails that day, and when he arrived, when he left, or at least when he left, even if he arrived before the window that they're looking at. Again, though, a little bit of a complication with geofencing data. It's not as easy as us getting a list of who was there in that circle at all times. It will be an extensive list of pings, and it will be anonymous at stage 1. So we know that they definitely had stage 1 data. Again, that was discussed at the hearings. This is a massive sort of spreadsheet, I'm imagining, of device IDs with location points within the geofence. So this would be multiple pings for each phone as that person is in that geofence area, interacting with their phone, moving around even, would create pings to show up. So again, this is a really good way of tracing a device's movement within the geofence. And again, a great way to corroborate witness statements, a great way to understand people's movements that day. Now, stage 1 is anonymous, so you're not going to be able to look at that and say, well, here's Rick's phone, let's see what it's doing. You will just be able to say device A does this, device B does this, device C does this. But again, if you marry that up with known witness statements, you're going to be able to have a pretty good idea of who's who. If you've got 2 or 3 phones, in a row, kind of walking side by side, essentially, then it's most likely the group of girls, right? I don't know how many of the girls had phones. So that's why I said it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4. But you'd be able to sort of start to kind of understand how that lines up. Now, again, this is going to be a lot of data because it isn't just the number of phones present, it's all the pings from those phones as well. And this is why it is so many lines of data. I can't remember the number that Jennifer gives in the pretrial hearing, but it is a lot. The thing is, what they can then do is when they notice any phone that they're kind of suspicious of or more interested in, they can then go and request stage 2 data from Google, which would give broader location history. So this will give location history for those selective devices beyond the geofence. So this could be, if you see a device sort of moving around and you think, oh, that might be Rick Allen's phone, you could request stage 2. It would still be anonymous, but it would show then, did that phone then go to Whiteman Drive? Right? And then at stage 3, again, you'd need to provide another warrant to Google for this, but this is where we can then unmask the device ID. Now, they don't routinely do stage 3 for all data in a geofence because that is the kind of people worry obviously about privacy, and there is no need to identify every single device in an area. However, you would do that probably for those devices very much in the kind of close proximity to the crime scene, with any suspicious detail, movement, any that you can't figure out who they belong to based on witness statements, particularly because this is a small area. So what we would expect is that all of the witnesses that came forward would be showing up on that geofence, and you'd be able to kind of trace what they said with the sort of pings around the geofence. So it will show you, not obviously again tracking it sort of second by second, but what it will show is the overall movement of those people over, with intervals maybe of 1 to 5 minutes in between. But that would still give you a pretty good idea, pinged at Freedom Bridge, pinged at Mears, pinged at south side of the bridge. So it would still give a really good amount of information still. Okay, so it's not fail safe, but it's certainly would provide a general gist of movement. And again, in a case like this where, oh, sorry, I flicked ahead now a few slides. What am I doing? In a case like this where there won't be huge amounts of devices in the area, you're going to be able to track out the 10 or 20 devices that were certainly on the trails that day and within the geofence. So that's the geofencing. From my understanding of the pre-trial hearings, Jennifer was referring to stage 1 data and requesting stage 2 and 3. And of course, that was not being provided easily by the state. Enough said, right? So another thing that came up in those pretrial hearings was the cast report. Now, again, I'm not going to try to define what a cast report is. I have no expertise in this, but my understanding is that there are youth programs. It's usually done by the FBI team, and what they do is they combine the geofencing data with the tower data, and they basically are able to sort of really narrow down and pinpoint, almost triangulate certain devices. And so what do we know about this? So courtesy of All Eyes on Delphi's amazing resource on her website. I have screenshotted here what we have heard about. Now, most people have heard about this. This is the 3 phones that pinged very close to the crime scene, I believe within 100 yards, 60 to 100 yards, during that key window, 12:39 to 5:49. Now, this comes up a lot because obviously this seems incredibly suspicious. These 3 phones seem to be, clearly, wouldn't they be the people who are involved in the crime if they're the only phones pinging in the crime scene during that time? I think there's more to it than that. And I may be misunderstanding, but when I read this, they ping at one time point, not multiple. So to me, that suggests that they only ping at that point in passing, which means that they're actually just passers-by. They're people walking around, driving around in the nearby area. Now, I don't know the distance of the crime scene to, other things in and around the area. So I'm not trying to sort of say that I'm just reading what Peggy's saying. The Prosecutors League did an excellent job explaining cast. Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not trying to suggest that I understand it completely because I definitely don't. But yeah, apparently they identified these 3 devices. But from what I'm reading, and I could be wrong, they are only pinging once. So my sense is that these devices are random people in and around the area. Now, my understanding is that none of those 3 devices are linked to a suspect. So they did unmask these using the geofencing data. We don't know who they belong to. But my understanding is that none of those 3 devices were linked to anyone suspicious. I don't believe that they were linked to any of the key third-party potential suspects that we all talk about. What we do know is that Rick's phone was not one of them. What we don't know is, did Libby's phone also show up in that area? They say that those 3 phones were not Libby's and they were not Rick's. So Rick's phone was not active in that area, but it doesn't say that Libby's phone wasn't active in that area. It just says that there were 3 unknown devices. Well, Libby's phone is an unknown device, so I would imagine that Libby's phone potentially does show up in that area under the geofencing report, because Libby's phone, we do know, was on. We do know that it was connected to apps. It was an iPhone, but most iPhones still have Google accounts too, particularly in 2017. Again, I don't know. I'd be curious about that because I really wonder if geofencing, again, could really clear up the girls' movements as they went down the hill, rather than using Apple Health data where we're kind of having to scrutinize elevations and times and things like that, which is really actually not super accurate or helpful either. And this is why it's such a contentious issue. If there is indeed geofencing data for Libby's phone, then we'd be able to actually pinpoint a little bit more about the movements. Again, this could completely debunk the state's timeline. Interesting that nobody's discussed it, nobody's explained if it has been done, if it hasn't been done, why it hasn't been done. I mean, sure, if her phone is not in the geofencing, then potentially she just didn't have, a phone that was capable of being traced by geofencing. But I find that hard to believe, and I think it's something that needs to be cleared up. So the conclusion, though, I guess that I've made, and again, it could be a false conclusion, guys, so you let me know, but is whoever committed this crime likely had their phone off or in aeroplane mode. So there is no phone pinging consistently in that area from a tower dump perspective or a geofence perspective, which suggests that not only would location services and Google aspects be turned off, but would also means that the phone was potentially turned off or in aeroplane mode. Now, of course, this is where the people who believe Rick's guilty go, yes, see, told you so. Rick's guilty. He switched his phone off. It's, consciousness of guilt and all of that sort of stuff. Well, potentially, but not necessarily. So we know that Rick wasn't one of those phones, but we don't know if he appeared in other tower dumps or geofencing data. If his phone is pinging elsewhere at that time, and if his geofence if the geofence kind of tracking is tracing him somewhere else, then his phone's clearly on. We can't use the excuse of his phone's off, but we can say that he's somewhere else. So we know that in 2017, Doolan took out the battery to find the phone identifier. So in this case, for Rick's phone, it wasn't an IMEI, it was a MEAD hex, but still really useful data. Rick's 2017 phone was not found during the execution of the search warrant in 2022. So I think a lot of people then say, well, you can't trace his phone. Well, guess what? You can. The MEAD hex info is enough to locate Rick's pings. And I wonder, was this ever done? So Rick's phone. I'm going to get back to what guilters might say about Rick's phone. Did he leave it at home if it is pinging, but it's not pinging the crime scene? We'll get back to that in a minute. But let's just, again, look at Rick's phone and what we could find using his MEAD hex, if nothing else. So if his phone is pinging, it means the phone is on. If the phone is not pinging, it means the phone is off or in aeroplane mode or not within that tower area or out of range. So first question that we'd have, I suppose, looking at the tower dumps is Rick's device in the tower dumps? When is it pinging? Is it pinging at all? Because that's going to straight away tell us, did he have his phone on for part of the day? Did he have his phone on all day? Did his phone never ping? Was he not there at all? Was it pinging throughout? And I'm just not sure why we don't know that, because that would be helpful potentially for one side or the other. I'm just going to pause for a minute. Oh, thank you, Shibi. Really appreciate that. I hope I'm pacing this okay and everyone's following. I'm getting into the kind of groove now of doing it, but I also know I'm a passionate over talker and I can be quite loud. So yeah, let me know if I need to go back or paste anything. All right, so yeah, so basically, if Rick's phone is pinging, this is where we can get that not only, potential locations and ideas of where he was, but it can also tell us a little bit about his movement. I'm sorry, I just said movement, about his activity. So if the phone's on and pinging, we can determine, is it idle? Because if it's on and it's pinging and doing sort of background pinging, then that suggests that the phone is on, but no one's interacting with it and it's potentially just sitting in one spot, i.e. maybe just at home. If it's moving between sectors and towers, likely that he's on the go, he's driving, or he's walking, I suppose, but in a way that goes between sectors. But yeah, you'd be able to see that. And if you see normal activity, and what I mean by that is texting, little bits of data, then that's going to be kind of what most of us would have on our phone at various points. So at the moment, for example, my phone is sitting beside me as I talk. It would be only showing idle pings in the tower that I'm pinging off. But throughout the day, you're going to see me on Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, lots of data. You'll see the occasional text. And you'll barely ever see a call because I'm not a phone call person. I hate phone calls. But yeah, you'd get a pretty good idea of what's going on for me during the day based on what my phone is doing, right? So again, it's not like a moment by moment, video recording of what somebody is doing. It's not going to help us go, well, he was on this side at this time doing this, but it is going to help us get an overall pattern of behavior. Now, obviously, if there's no pings, that is suspicious. I'm not going to lie. If it turns out that Rick's phone shows no pings during that day, or it certainly stops pinging during the crime window, then you know what? I potentially would lean that guilty. I just don't believe that's the case, because I believe if that was the case, surely McClelland would have loved to throw that out there as evidence for the jury to see. So the info can be used to interpret what Rick was doing during that crucial time window. And I'm really, really interested in what it shows. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's just do a little bit of a rebuttal to the guilters out there. Now, no shade on guilters. As anyone who knows me in the community will find, I am not against people having a different opinion. In the Reddit subreddit that I developed, that I started, there are plenty of people. In fact, I think it's about 50-50 people who believe he's guilty and people who believe he's innocent. I have no drama with people who think he's guilty, as long as they're not being nasty and mean. And there are plenty of people who think he's guilty who are open-minded and willing to look at the evidence. So yeah, I think it's just about keeping an open mind. But the guilters will often say, and sorry, guilter sounds like a mean name, but yeah, no shade. He had his phone off to hide himself during the crime. Right, that's the first thing you hear when anyone brings up he wasn't one of the 3 phones, right? But the thing is, if that's true, the tower dump data will show that he did not ping at all during the window of the crime. And if that's true, why didn't the state use this as evidence of consciousness of guilt and show that he lied about being on a stock ticker? I mean, you've got a double whammy there. You can say, well, he had his phone off, like Brian Koberger, for example. And secondly, they would be saying, and he lied as well, because both in 2017 and in 2022, he does say that he was likely on his stock ticker. So he's now lying about what he was doing and, on the trails that day. And he's got his phone off. Doubly suspicious, right? The reality is, I don't think that's what the data shows. And that is why we have not heard that. Then the guilters will say, well, he left his phone at home to hide himself during the crime, because if it's pinging in the background throughout the crime, and it's not in the area of the crime scene, then basically people will say, well, he's guilty, but he left his phone at home. Now, of course, that's possible. I believe that there are some individuals, EF might be one of them, where the phone seems to be pinging at home all day and idle. So yes, that is suspicious. I agree. And again, if that's what the phone data shows, I would be looking a little bit more into that and maybe questioning my certainty about Rick Allen's innocence. However, again, if that was true, the state would have used that as evidence. The state would have used it as evidence to show that he left his phone at home. Again, consciousness of guilt. But if Rick's phone pinged the towers during the time frame and the activity was analysed, it could provide vital information to form a behavioural timeline. So mapping the pings and activity would tell us whether he was scrolling at home, driving, walking around, idle or silent. And if normal use overlaps the crime scene, that's pretty exculpatory. It's highly unlikely that he is abducting 2 girls and murdering them and staging this awful crime scene while checking his stocks, on the phone to Kathy, texting, so that would already be some good exculpatory information. Also, actually, I'm just skipping ahead. No. So also, if he is showing up as pinging during the crime window, and he's not one of those 3 phones identified by cast, then that suggests that he is in the vicinity, which is a massive tower, massive sector, but also that he is not at the crime scene. So again, how do we make sense of that? How is he telepathically committing the crime and being silly here? But it's ridiculous, right? Either his phone is off or at home, and that explains then why he's not showing up in those phones in the crime scene. Or if his phone is on and it's pinging and there's activity and movement, then he is not the killer. So it's absolutely vital to look at behaviorally what that data shows. I'd love to be able to see that. Be amazing. So additionally, even stage 1 geofencing data could help identify people on the trails that day. So I kind of explained this before, but while it's anonymous, it provides repeated pings that could be married up to witness statements and tower dump data. So if we have stage 2 data, then on top of that, we could have even more information about movements outside the geofence. So we could see, did Rick Allen then go home? Where did he come from? Did he come from his mum's house, like he said? Did he go home and then he came to the bridge? You'd really get a good idea of his movements over that period of time. And of course, if we get to stage 3 data, we can identify or uncover the identity of each device. So Rick's phone movements could be identified using tower dumps and stage 1 geofencing data alone, both of which are in discovery. And the reason I put that in red in capitals with a exclamation mark is this is so important. I don't, but his team has this information. And so they can figure out his movements that day. And when they do that, unless it's suspicious, this is highly exculpatory. And the chances are it isn't suspicious, because if it were, are we really to imagine that McClelland wouldn't have used that against him? So why wasn't it analysed? I don't know. Maybe it was, and maybe there really was no conclusive information. I find that hard to believe. But one of the things that was telling was listening to Andy Baldwin being interviewed by Andy Kopser. I think it was like several weeks ago now. And she directly asked this question. I was so glad she did, because it was a question on my mind. And he said he didn't think that they could do that. So this suggests to me that the defense didn't focus on this. Their focus was on other people in the geofencing data, not on Rick's movements. That's how they argued it in the hearings. So I wonder, was it analysed? And if it was analysed and it didn't provide any benefit, I'm kind of doubtful of that, because I do think the state would have used it. Now, some people will say, well, it was probably analysed, but it was unclear. I still just don't see how that could be the case, because if it's either going to show that he did have his phone on and he was moving around, which is clearly exculpatory, or it's going to show that he didn't have his phone on, and that is a really quite a clear indicator of potential, not clear indicator, but a potential indicator of guilt. So I think the data has to be useful to one side or another. It can't be completely wholly inconclusive based on my understanding. So now we get to the point that, like I said, everybody raises when we say, well, this could have actually helped Rick. And people will say, well, it was suppressed, so nothing you can really do about it. That's Gull's fault. And yes, I agree, Gull should not have excluded it. There's also an issue here, though, that the defence argued for geofencing to be included in terms of identifying other potential suspects. They didn't argue that it was particularly for maybe creating an alibi for Rick and substantiating his statement. So the defense tried to argue, look, these other phones were near the bridge. Maybe one of them belongs to serial killer. I've got that in quote marks. It's not a quote, but that's, kind of probably what they roughly said. Gull lumped the entire cast geofencing evidence into third party suspects category and said, again, not her exact words, you're using it to suggest others were present, so it's out. And McClelland said it's not accurate, which is inaccurate. Nick, it is inaccurate. The geofencing data is used in other cases, and it has been for many, many years. It is not highly inaccurate. Tower dump data alone, yes, that could, someone can ping and they could be miles away because that tower, particularly in a rural area, is covering a large amount of area, and we've only got the two towers. But geofencing would have been far more accurate, and usually can pinpoint, I believe, within 100.
Okay, guys, I wasn't actually even listening to my geofencing video, which is because I can't multitask. I was chatting with you guys at the time instead and looking at my phone. But I think it covered the main stuff just then. We don't need to listen to a whole hour and 49 minutes. If you want to, you can. One of the things I noticed about that video is there's a lot more and I can't stand it. When I edit my videos, I edit out the the and the they're so annoying. I don't know if they're as annoying for you guys as they are for me when I listen to myself back. But I guess the whole point of showing you guys that was again to show you, what does that data actually provide? It isn't just a list of names or points on a map, but even without the actual identifiers, it would show us a whole lot of patterns that could be mapped within that geofence. So it might say phone A, phone B, or whatever identifiers they give it. And so even the anonymous data is still helpful because for someone like me who loves tracking things and tracing things around, I would just love to look at it. I would literally, I think you guys all know by now, I would probably spend my whole Christmas break with a map with a gazillion different colors of, I don't know, pins or string or whatever, and I would plot it all out. I would totally do that. So shout out to Andy Baldwin. If you want me to do that, I would do that for you because that would not only be super satisfying in terms of, proving or understanding what actually happened with the people around the crime scene or around the trails that day. But on top of that, that'd be satisfying for me. That's the sort of thing I enjoy just doing for fun. Like those are sorts of games I play as well. So I would totally be up for doing that. I don't know if I've said this before on my channel. I probably have, but I was really obsessed with MH 370. And I wonder if anyone in here's had that similar obsession. And I remember when the plane went missing, for I guess a few weeks or months after, they had people like they were almost like this. Do they call it crowdsourcing? Where they would basically put the like there were satellite images, and everyone could like go through the satellite images like block by block and mark off if they'd seen any debris in the ocean. And I did that. I did that. Lisa, you're obsessed too. Me too. You know what? It's another one of those ones where my intuitive first thinking is that the pilot isn't responsible. And I kind of have a similar vibe from him as I do for Rick. Now, obviously, with Rick, there's a lot more information that we've had to kind of back up that initial vibe. But with the MH370, there just isn't enough. And I don't know. It really breaks my heart that this experienced pilot who seemed to be a genuine, person had done this terrific, this I said terrific. I didn't mean terrific, of course, guys. Goodness, it's one of those days, isn't it, Hebby, right? One of, those horrific things. Like yeah, I don't know. I don't like to believe that people do terrible things, but I also don't like to believe people who to me seem too similar to people I know doing terrible things. So I will admit there's definitely that bias. But with Rick, it goes beyond that, guys. It's not just my vibes or intuition. Like there's a lot of data that supports that Rick is not the offender of this case, both, well, probably mainly for me. The stuff that I can say without having to have any additional data is that he does not meet the profile. I still stand by the fact that he's a forensic unicorn. Rick, if he committed this crime, is absolutely this like phenomenon and should be studied in significant detail, not locked away in Oklahoma, because he would have to be simultaneously I muted myself, simultaneously the most sophisticated, clever, organized, sadistic killer and person, but also really silly in terms of like putting himself at the crime scene in the same clothes in the same time window. Like, it's just too much of a, what do they call it? Is it a juxtaposition? I mean, it's too much of a contrast. You can't be so clever that you evade detection, you evade any leakage of sadism for your entire life, but you're not clever enough to not put yourself at the place where you committed the crime in the clothes that you were wearing on that day. Now, my overall summation of Rick is not that he's not clever or that he's, some sadistic clever person. My summation is he's a normal guy, like a normal person like myself and like everybody in here, where I would honestly say what I was wearing and what time I was somewhere, even if it made me seem a bit guilty, because I'd know that was the truth. Right. So I'm not suggesting he's silly for saying that. I'm suggesting that if he were the offender, he would be incredibly silly for saying that. So, yeah, just need to clarify that, because it's certainly not me trying to say he's not clever as a person. I'm just saying he's not sneaky, clever, sadistic offender that keeps getting thrown around. I get really fixated, on the offender stuff, the offender profile stuff, the psychology stuff, because that's my area of interest. And I do feel like it's the factor that I like I said, I don't actually need a lot more discovery data to stand by. I mean, of course, I think if we had the full report from Polly Westcott, and if I had the full notes from Dr. Wala, and I was able to meet Rick and I was able to do other assessments on him that I would deem reasonable, I think that it would help to corroborate my ideas. But even without that, there is no known offender in history that shows not even an ounce of sadistic leakage and yet has been guilty of an organized sadistic crime. So I will always continue to come back to that. I know I'm a broken record, but it's so important, and it's something that can't just be dismissed. What do they call it? What's the word, guys? Hand flicked? No. Hand waved away by saying, "Oh, but you never know." Well, we do know. This man saw psychiatrists for decades. Oh, hey, Anna Lizette. So good to see you. So good to see you. Yeah, so I agree. A sadist. Also, I guess this is a point, and I'm going to talk about this. I've got a myth video that I'm still editing at the moment, but this idea of sadism, and I think this is where we use terms that are clinical terms in everyday language, and it kind of muddies the water. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. It's like if I say, I'm obsessive about true crime, it's a different meaning to the clinical term obsession, right? Which is to do with an intrusive, distressing thought as part of OCD. And this is where I get so crazy when people say the obsessive compulsive killer, for example, because obsessive compulsive disorder does not impact or influence crimes. In fact, it would probably be more likely the inverse relationship. But in sadism, I always get on my my bandwagon about OCD. That's my interest area. But anyway, let's go back to sadism. So people would be like, well, of course a killer's sadistic. No. Clinical sadism doesn't mean cruel, lacking empathy. What it means is a specific collection of qualities and traits that have to have shown this pervasive pattern through your life. So to be clinically a sadist, it can't just be that you're a bit mean or even that you're violent and nasty. All killers are not sadists. In fact, the organized sadistic offender profile is an absolute minority. I think I have the statistic somewhere and I will bring it up in one of my upcoming videos, but it's something around the 1%, but maybe even less percent of crimes are organized sadistic offenders. So it's a very rare case, hence why everybody knows Ted Bundy, everybody knows BTK, right? But not everybody knows, Joe Bloggs who killed his wife last week, because there's a zillion, not a zillion, but there's a lot of Joe Bloggs that killed their wives out there, and that doesn't make those crimes any less serious and sad, and it doesn't make those people any less guilty, but they're not organized sadistic offenders. It's a particular subclass of offender. And so when people say, well, you have to be sadistic to kill the girls, you have to be sadistic to hurt to teenagers on a trails. No, actually, you could have elements of sadism, but that's not a clinical sadist. What I'm saying here isn't that there are elements of sadism. I'm saying that this is an organized sadistic offender, and it ticks the boxes. So we will do a video again on that. There are checklists basically that have been developed through the forensic research, and they talk about the main kind of factors in an organized sadistic crime, and these are validated kind of lists. And it's things like organization of the crime scene, so posing, symbolism, the signatory type stuff that we've talked about, as well as clothes being changed, restraint, things like that. There's a lot of aspects that differentiate an organized sadistic homicide from a homicide which may have cruelty and horrible elements to it, but it's not sadism. So sadism is about domination, humiliation, control, and sexual sadism obviously has that sexual element, but most sex offenders are not sexual sadists. Now, I didn't know that, so I'm not here preaching and sort of saying, oh, well, duh, everyone should know that. I didn't know that until I researched it. It's not an area that I had studied in depth in my career, but it's something I have now in relation to this case. And when you look at clinical sadism, it's quite different. I agree with you, Digital. I definitely believe that this is... not definitely. Look, but I very much swing towards it being multiple offenders. Yes, Israel Keys, great example, D. So yeah, BTK, Israel Keys, Ted Bundy, Lisk, I'm sure would be organized sadistic. Most serial killers are. I think there are some that may not be, and I think there are some that are not organized sexual sadists, but they're organized sadists. I think Israel Keys may be one of them. So some of them have more of the sexual sadism, and some of them are what we'd call, I guess, non-sexual sadism. I mean, I don't even know if we can be sure that it's non-sexual sadism just because we don't see a clear sexual element. It's so hard to get into the mind of these people. Oh, yes, Paul Bernardo, another one. Oh, that Casey. Oh, that one, the Barbie and Ken murders, Carla Homolka. I actually do want to talk about Carla Homolka because talking about Digital's point of it being a bunch of people, I believe it is that sort of a dynamic that's going on potentially. Maybe not two people, maybe more, but that there is the sadistic kind of ringleader, and then I think the ones kind of on the edges who have been coerced, but also, are participating. So again, we're not sort of trying to give too much lenience to people who were engaged in this crime, but there may be some that are not sadistic in the official sense, or maybe, have antisocial traits, but are not clearly what's the word? Yeah, psychopathic and sadistic. I don't know. But yeah, that one really haunts me, the Barbie and Ken murders. I'm sure everyone in here is a true crime enthusiast and knows about the Barbie and Ken murders. It's really terrific. And the fact that Carla Homolka was released and, went on to live, I suppose, a quote unquote normal life. I mean, I very much believe in forgiveness and rehabilitation. And, I suppose, yeah, I want to look more into her profile though, because I think her profile will help us to understand potentially if there was someone known to the victims who engaged in this, who acted as a lure, I guess, to get them out there that day. It could probably help us to understand how someone that they trusted and knew could do this to them, whilst also that person maybe not being sadistic and psychopathic themselves. So yeah, I think that we'll definitely look into those sorts of dynamics. We have lots of these sort of gang crimes. Well, not lots. I mean, again, they're rare. Here in Australia, we had one. We have two lots of kind of gang rape and murder crimes. So we've got the Anita Cobby murder, and again, I don't know if any of you guys are aware of that one. That's an Australian case. I know most people in here are not from Australia. I wouldn't mind actually doing a little bit of an expose on that one, because I think you guys wouldn't know much about it, and yet I think it's actually a really interesting case. And again, we see a ringleader who is most certainly an organized sadistic murderer, and then we see a group that kind of get involved as a pack. And yeah, to me, this crime sounds far more in line with things like that, like the Anita Cobby murders. We've got Janine Balding is another one that occurred in Australia as well, same sort of thing. I think that this crime had the potential to be like those crimes if indeed the girls had been taken in the car somewhere else. But I think that was thwarted, and that's my theory today. I believe that the plan was thwarted by the fact that the private drive maybe does have a gate. And again, maybe someone can confirm this for me, because there'll be people here who have much more knowledge of, you know, the area and of what it looked like. There'd be people who actually have been to that private drive. So I'd be really keen to hear, particularly back in that sort of era of 2017. Yeah, and Lizette, I'm pretty confident about that suggestion too, because I've been looking into it more, and I do have another video to make, which I'll probably do this week, about how exactly the sticks may have held those poses. Because when I did the short video, I think it was last week, and then I did the live, I was still kind of making sense of it myself too, because I'm not an expert in physics and biomechanics. So I was thinking about, you know, what would the bodies actually look like if the sticks weren't there? And I'm still kind of grappling with that. I was thinking about ways like that you can actually test it. And it's so hard because you can't test positioning of bodies in a live body, even if the body is relaxed, even if the body's asleep, because there's still muscle tension in a body that's alive. So the only real way to test it would be to have some sort of you know, a rag doll with multiple limbs, I suppose, like separated, which again, I mean, where do you find that from? I know there are 3D programs that you can use as well, where you can test this stuff out with gravity and stuff, but I definitely don't have the technical know-how to do that. But yes, interestingly, when you notice that the sticks, particularly the thickest branch on Libby and on Abby, they are running alongside the left hand side of the body, which would have been the slight slope downwards towards the creek. I think that's super, super key. Yes, Annalisa. Yes, we're on the same page for sure. Yeah. So gravity would not necessarily. So I think when we were talking about this the other day, I was getting confused with the arm reached over Libby's head. No, that could still stay where it is to some extent. That's not the abnormality of it. What's abnormal is, first of all, that the palm is facing up. That's not common in crime scenes of bodies that have passed away. And the other thing is that the body isn't rotating further to the left. So I think the stabilization was that big, thick branch that we've all seen. And same with Abby. Again, I've kind of evolved the idea. I don't think that the hands being on her chest is necessarily unnatural. In fact, I mean, as horrific as it is, I was looking up crime scene images to try and get a sense of what a body looks like when it's dead. What a horrible search to do, guys. And I did it before bed. That was not a good idea last night. Yeah, but I wanted to really truly understand it. And so, and I'm only looking at like publicly available things. I'm not kind of going into any dark web stuff, of course, because I would never want to do that. But yeah, I think though, again, the body would tilt more to the left, and particularly for Abby's body, what's unusual is more the stacked leg position. So the fact that there's that branch that goes right down her upper thigh as well as the stabilization of the torso, which would help to maintain that leg on top of the other leg. And, you know, when you look at those tarot positions, it's a remarkable similarity. I don't know if everyone agrees with that. I'm not suggesting that tarot motivates murder, so please don't think that. I'm not suggesting that Odinism or any type of pagan ritualistic kind of aspects are what motivated the crime. What I'm just suggesting is that the symbolism at the scene may be represented in those ways. So we see this as well in organized sadistic crime scenes. There is symbolism. It doesn't mean that symbolism is related to the intention or the cause, but it's that's where they kind of maybe have this fantasy or inspiration for how to stage the bodies, if that makes sense. I'm still trying to get my head around this because, of course, myself, as everyone I'm sure here in the chat, we can't get into the mind of a sadistic offender because none of us are sadists here. you know? So to me, the idea of hurting someone is awful. Like, I feel terrible when I wipe the ants away from my cat food bowl because I'm killing a whole lot of ants. And I mean, most of the time I compartmentalize with that, but the more you think about it, the harder it gets to do. I've been saving bees from my swimming pool, and when the bee dies, I feel terrible, even though I'm allergic to bees, so they could literally kill me. You all know I hate the frogs, the noise of the frogs, but when a frog's stuck in my pool, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get this frog out, and I'm scared of the frog, and it becomes a whole rigmarole that like wastes hours of my day. So I know I'm not alone in that. It's not that I'm some super special kind person. I'm pretty sure everyone in this chat, if they thought about, you know, killing a creature, it feels like a horrendous thing to do. And I know we sometimes do it out of necessity, whether it's bugs or, you know, pests control, or obviously we, you know, a lot of us eat meat, but the idea of doing that and then doing that in a way that prolongs suffering and then staging it, like, really? I know you like the frogs, Critter Mama. We need to switch. You need to come live where I do. I can't stand the noise. It's just like, it kills me. It's just such a horrendous noise. But also, they do scare me a little bit. I'm a little bit scared of frogs. Not scared that they're going to hurt me. It's more a disgust thing. It's the same with like spiders and bugs, but frogs particularly, they've got like an icky look about them. Yeah, but I would never want to hurt a frog. There's no way I would ever want to deliberately hurt a frog. I mean, I might sometimes say I'm going to go out there and kill them all, but of course I would never do that. I mean, it's horrible, like the idea of hurting a living creature, just horrible. But yeah, so I definitely am leaning more and more towards the sticks having at least like some of the function being the mechanics of the bodies. There may still be symbolism too. I mean, the sticks across the wounding around the neck, I mean, is that stabilization, or is it to do with marking or highlighting the wound? I mean, I don't know for sure. It could be both. And then again, I think we were talking before about the sticks in the blood pool. It's hard to know. I mean, the pictures that I've seen, of course, they're not crime pictures of that blood pool. I don't believe anyone's seen those pictures. I'm sure they exist, but they weren't part of the leaked crime scene pictures. But my understanding, when you look at the official police sketch, is they don't actually look like a full asterisk. They look almost like a T shape. So again, deliberate placement, perhaps, because they're on top of the blood. Is that placement a symbol? Potentially. I don't think it's the asterisks that we've seen in some of the photos, but then again, I could be wrong again as well, because I haven't seen the actual photos. And if they're an asterisk, I mean, yes, I think that would be very meaningful. So certainly I'm not going to shut down the idea that there is symbolism with the sticks themselves, but I think that the primary symbolism is, or at least one of the primary elements of symbolism, is the posing of the bodies, and those tarot poses just match just too well. And if you look into the meaning of those tarot poses, again, they were not intended to mean anything about murder or death. So don't get me wrong, we're not going against tarot here. But if we look at the overall kind of idea and think about how that could relate to an offense, I think that's kind of interesting. Now, I haven't gone as far as to do that yet, because it's certainly not an area of expertise for me. What I was thinking, though, is Ash, my friend, who you guys have all heard on the psych panel, is very interested in spirituality and tarot. And the two of us and two other friends who are also interested in spirituality, and they are also in mental health roles as well. We are going away in a few weeks, and they are also like interested in learning more about Delphi. They don't know a lot about it, but yeah, they I may be able to get them to come on and we do a little bit of a panel, and that would be, you know, speculative. We're not working, you know, we're not operating as psychologists in that capacity or anything like that. It's more just getting a sense of like symbolism and what it could mean. Yes, Data, definitely fantasy driven. So if we're to assume that this is a sadistic homicide, then yes, there would be a fantasy behind it. Yeah. And I think where I'm leaning now is a combination of fantasy driven, sadistic offending, but also potentially a loose link to the victims. And when I say a loose link, because I never want anyone to think I'm suggesting family, I don't believe that the family are involved at all. And I know I'm still due to do a video about what I think about the family's reactions, but in short, I think that the family have reacted in a way that is about trying to cope. I don't believe that the family is suspicious at all, and I know some people in here will believe that, and that's totally fine, but I don't tend to take that mindset for a variety of reasons, which I'll raise later. But yeah, I think that there's some sort of loose link. One of my theories is, I mean, these are just theories, these are just theoretical kind of speculations, but did one of the victims inadvertently make this perpetrator feel rejected, humiliated, out of control? So yeah, I feel like maybe, and I just think there's too many coincidences for us not to maybe see that there could be links between the killer and the girls. Yeah, and it is a small and it is a small town as well. So I think yeah, my working theory is that the perpetrator and perpetrators, that at least a few of them would have known one or both the girls and may have had some other motive. I don't believe that it was only that. I don't believe that this is motivated by, drugs or, drug debts or, I don't know, financial gain, because in those murders, generally they're kind of quick, clean attacks, guns, stabbing, move on. It's not really usually a hit kind of, as opposed to the sort of organized sadistic crime. But I think that there could be a dual motive. And I think that if we're dealing with a sadistic offender with narcissistic elements, then, it could be to do with a narcissistic injury as well. Like, okay, you're going to reject my advances, I'm going to show you, that kind of mindset. But I don't know. I mean, that's also for me, that's me trying to make sense of behavior that can't be made sense of, right? So I think sometimes when we try to assign a motive of revenge or retribution, it makes more sense to us, doesn't it? Because essentially it's like, we want to know why someone does something. That gives us a sense of safety in this world. It kind of, not safety, but well, yeah, it gives us a sense of return to more equilibrium. If we can make sense of why someone does this, then maybe we can protect ourselves from it. So it's a very human thing to do. So it could completely be random. Like you're saying, Dita, that it's not retaliation. Absolutely. And I think that, we know that in certainly in certain organized sadistic offenders, it is random. They do just literally pick someone that is there, and it's opportunistic to some extent. It's planned and it's premeditated and it's organized, but the person they choose isn't necessarily someone they knew well or had any sort of relationship with. So very, very possible that it's just a random choice of convenience. But look, either are possibilities. I don't think that either could be completely ruled out from what we see here. But what I do believe can be completely ruled out is that it's a random man who didn't really know the girls, who decides one day, oh, you know what, I have snapped at the age of 44 and I've decided what I'm going to do when I snap is to abduct girls, sexually assault them. I'm going to pick two victims because why not make it harder for myself? And then when I'm worried about getting caught, I'm going to traipse them over a cold creek and get them to the other side, and then not kill them really quickly because I'm scared of the van and being seen, but actually take my time and make these poor girls suffer, and then I'm going to stage their bodies. And then I'm going to go on living my life, and there's never going to be any leakage. And the only thing you're going to find that links me to the crime scene is the most tenuous, ridiculous link of an unspent round that matches an unspent round that doesn't even match. Sorry, no, it's a round in a hope box that is a trophy of the mistake I made at the crime scene by dropping an unspent round, and that unspent round at the crime scene matches my gun, but it doesn't really. It only matches my gun when you have to use 10 different rounds and then eventually shoot one in order to find even slight characteristics in common, and is not part of any evidence-based science. But yeah, that's how we're going to link Richard Allen to this crime. So when you hear it that way, guys, I mean, I don't know, does it not seem absurd? Like, I think I know a lot of people in here do see it as absurd. That the only thing that supposedly directly links Rick to the crime is his supposed trophy bullet. which it would not be a trophy. If we're talking about a sadistic offender, he's not going to be proud of the fact that he dropped an unspent round that then matches back to his gun that he still kept for 5.5 years. And it doesn't even match the gun, as we know. And if you want to go back to some of my older videos where I go through the tool mark analysis step by step, like we did with the geofencing today, she needed to use multiple rounds, and only then did she find something that slightly possibly matched. It's just it's absurd, right? That round that science is terrible. And tool mark analysis, no, I'm not saying that's terrible. In general, there are some good arguments for using it, but in this case, when you look at the actual methodology, and I can't remember it all in detail now, I did that a couple of months ago, but I remember it was that she used multiple rounds. Of course, the unspent rounds didn't match the racked rounds, and then the ones that did, I think one of the four that actually even matched, and she couldn't even tell you because it wasn't, at least in the report or the testimony that we saw, there wasn't actually an indication of how many matched, how they matched. Like, it was just, yeah. Yes, Dita says, speaking of trophies, let's talk about this, because Dita and I were talking about this together yesterday. And both of us, interestingly, had come to the same kind of idea around the same time. And so Dita messaged me yesterday and she was like, well, what's missing? I hope you don't mind, Dita, I'm just sharing what you messaged me. But we were talking about what was actually missing, and we both came upon the same conclusions, that Libby's underwear, Libby's panties, we call them pants here, or undies here in Australia, that's what was missing, because Abby's were found in the creek, but Libby's were missing. I think they found 2 socks. So we were also talking about where the socks are missing. I mean, potentially Abby's socks are missing because I think the socks found in the creek matched Libby, but I think also there's the potential that Abby wasn't wearing socks. She was just wearing her Converse because her feet aren't dirty. And it seems as though the shoes didn't seem to go off her feet at any point. But it's hard to know. It's hard to know. But absolutely certainly what we do know is that there's only one set of underwear, and I believe that underwear matches Abby, not Libby. So yeah, I think Dita and I both agree that, I mean, that to me seems far more likely to be a trophy of an organised sadistic homicide. Another thing actually I wanted to mention, now thinking about that as well, another little little detail I noticed was that there was none of Libby's blood on Abby. Now, Libby would have been, I believe, the first victim, and that apparently is not super unusual. Initially, I thought, well, surely if he's using the same weapon, then there would be transfer, but apparently you can wipe the blood quite quickly and the DNA is kind of, I guess, wiped off, particularly in sort of outdoor crime scene and things like that. I think though that what we did here, and this is me listening now back to the trial recaps, and then looking at the testimony, is that there was a small blood smear on the tongue of Abby's shoe, the shoe that she's wearing in the crime scene picture. Now, to me, what that says is not that Libby touched Abby's shoe, because it doesn't seem like Libby went anywhere near Abby while she was dying and she was moving around, and the horrific image of that, I think, is so hard for all of us to imagine. I think Abby was frozen in shock, or perhaps incapacitated or restrained at that point, as Libby sort of moved around, near the F tree and then back to where the blood pool is and where she collapses. But if Libby had been in close proximity to Abby, there would have been more blood of Libby's on Abby. But the only thing I could hear, and I'll double check all of this, it's, just talking off the top of my head, but the only explanation that I could make of this is that the offender has touched the tongue of Abby's shoe. And why would he touch the tongue of Abby's shoe? Doesn't that match with our positioning of the stacked legs, right? There's no other reason he'd be touching a shoe in order to murder her, and that's the only spot we see. I feel like that would be a place that he would need to hold or touch in order to arrange her body, not in order to wound her, and not in order to silence or kind of restrain her. The only reason he'd need to touch her shoe after having killed Libby, to me, would be to arrange her foot. But interesting to know. Yeah. So yeah, sorry guys, I'm missing some comments. Please don't think that I don't think all of your thoughts are great, because they really are. I'm reading things as they go past and thinking, yes, there's just a lot of things that I agree with that you guys are saying. And Lizette, 100%. I just am really with you on so much as well. And digital, yes, totally with you, and Critter Mama too. Yeah. So in terms, yeah, there's lots of theories, definitely, Critter Mama. And I mean, I think, obviously we've got the fact, and then we've got the kind of interpretations of the fact. And I think we're doing a bit of both of that. And I think that's totally fine, as long as we continue um to say that we're speculating, which we do, and that's why I always have those disclaimers for myself, that they apply to all of us. We're not proposing that we're right. And that's one of the things I love about this community, is that we're not absolutely stuck on saying, well, I'm right and everybody else is wrong. Um, we can be confident in certain things, particularly, I mean, I'm confident in the whole forensic unicorn stuff, because I do feel like that's, based on fact. But I think some of our theories around who it might be, what might the motive be, what exactly happened, are going to be have to be flexible. Yes, Lisa, we're not a cult, 100%. And I love that. I feel like today we've definitely got more of the people who believe Rick is innocent in here. Usually we have a bit more of a mix, but even when we have the people who believe Rick is guilty in here, it never becomes a big conflictual negative zone, which I love. But yeah, absolutely all opinions are welcome. When I do the research that I do, I never just say, is what I think true? I always go, are you sure? Are we not sure? Let's look at all different options. Could this be this? Could it be that? I don't always share every part of my process here, but I think you guys have certainly heard some of it when I go live on a new idea that I haven't researched at depth. I really do always like to say, could it be this? Maybe it's not. Is it this? So yeah, yeah, and Lisette, people have talked about the 3-6 as well. I think someone else was talking about that earlier as well. Is there something to do with the 3 as well? Yeah, possibly. And I mean, that's the thing. There could be various symbolic elements, and we're just not aware of them all. And the hard thing is, again, is because we can't get into their mindset, right? Yeah, Dita, who knows? Who knows why? Some people are dismissed and other people are highlighted in this case. Yeah. There's definitely, I guess I'm never going to move away from my speculation around something being awry in the investigation, and it's more than just mistakes and incompetence. I will always allege that there is something else going on, that there is, I think that whoever did this, whoever this ringleader is, has the capacity to coerce a lot of people, because they're probably very scary. They're probably a very scary, dangerous person. And that is the type of person that would do this. It's not a meek, middle aged man who collapses with stress. This is not that. This is somebody who would be very scary, and maybe has status in some way, or has things on other people. But basically, like, this person's got power in some way. And that power, not necessarily thinking that they've got status in the sense of, being in a high position, but I think they have a status in the sense that they have control over things, whether it's lording something over other people, like information they have that could get other people into trouble. I think that's very possible. I even had a theory of, like, was the phone left behind because whoever acted as the lure for the girls, even though they used Snapchat, there might be stuff on that phone that could track back to someone who they were, in contact with, that doesn't seem suspicious alone. And, did the offender leave that there so that person didn't talk? I mean, these are all speculative theories, but I mean, I think again, they make somewhat logical, psychological sense as well. If you've got somebody who actually knew the victims and had maybe some level of relationship with them, and you've involved them in this case, then you're going to want to make sure they never speak, right? And so would leaving the phone there be a way to say, to threaten that person, well, if you tell on us, then there's links to you on the phone that can be revealed that don't look suspicious, but if they're put in context by this offender, could make that person look more suspicious, right? And just absolute clarity here, I'm not talking about anyone in the family. So I know there's lots of speculation around Kelsey, and I'm not talking about Kelsey. I'm not saying that whoever lured them there was anyone to do with the families of the girls, and I never want that to be what people think I'm saying, but maybe more someone that the girls had some sort of connection with. But yeah, I know it's so hard not to want to throw around, theories of specific people, and I've certainly at times alluded to people who I think could potentially be involved. And I think anyone who reads between the lines and knows the case well probably does kind of get a sense of maybe some of my theories of who might be involved. I don't directly have a specific one person who I think is the absolute ringleader and perpetrator, but I do have theories. I'm not going to put them out there here for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to accuse someone who is not actually, hasn't actually been investigated. Secondly, I don't want to impact the investigation either. I think that my understanding is that the defense are not super keen on us kind of going and trying to 100% solve the crime, right? And I understand that because we can't be verified sources. And what if they do go on to try to convict someone in the future, or at least suggest someone as a third party again, and information's been leaked and sometimes can be kind of contaminated by that? Witnesses could be put off testifying or providing information about particular offenders in future because their information has been used and they're scared. So I suppose I'm trying to be really careful about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously not suggesting that anyone in here has done that, but I'm just saying, like, I think you can read between the lines and think about who I might think is responsible. You all know by now I don't think that it's Kegan Kline or the Kleins. Clearly, I don't think it's Rick Allen. Those are the only ones right now, and the family. Those are the only ones that I'm willing to completely, rule out. But in terms of ruling in, I think, my silence about who I don't rule out is probably giving you some pretty clear indicators of some of the people I think who are involved. Yeah. But I want to always be careful. I think for me, the first goal is to help Rick to be exonerated. I think that's the more realistic thing that we can kind of work towards. I worry that the true offenders may never be caught. However, I still hope that they can. And even if they're not able to be actually apprehended, I hope that in Rick being exonerated, that there can still be peace for the family, in the sense that they do understand what really happened, so that they're not living the rest of their life thinking, they don't know what happened, or that Rick was the perpetrator and he got exonerated by all of us here who were trying to free him. I really always want to try and walk that line of respect for the families, even alongside advocating for Rick. And if the families were ever hearing what we're talking about or any of my content, I would always want them to know that I'm not doing this to help free someone who I believe was involved in the murder of those girls. I would never do that. I would never, ever do that. So I hope that some of the stuff that we uncover and talk about here helps to clarify who may have done it. But I also don't want to endanger any future investigations, and also don't want to legally get myself in trouble either. Let's be honest. It's not a good idea for me to go around throwing out names of people who I think committed the crime. So I'm going to be cautious about that, guys. But anyone who listens to me, I think, probably by now, some at least gist of my theory. And I really think that I would say that I'm pretty, I don't know, I'd say maybe 75% certain about at least a rough gist of who might have been responsible for this. I wouldn't say 100%, but I think I'm close. Like I said, probably what I don't know is the exact specifics of the main offender. if there is one main offender. Yeah. Yeah, critter mama. Me too. Like, my heart breaks for the families. My heart breaks for poor Kelsey and how she's been conveyed, in the media. For Anna, gosh, you can see that woman is broken, and Becky, um, and for everyone, and for Libby's parents as well. Like, for I know that there may be people who maybe have other criminal connections. That doesn't mean that they didn't love their kids. Like, plenty of criminals can have children and they can commit crimes that are problematic, but it doesn't mean they don't love their family, and it doesn't mean that anybody deserves to go through this. Nobody does. So, yeah. So, just going back to this theory that I have about the cars being kind of coordinated, you've got the lookout. Oh, yeah, Critter Mama, like, I was about to talk about that, and then I just, like, when I saw your comment, I thought, like, an image of my kids came into my head, and I always get this really somatic kind of sensation when I'm talking about this, about Abby and Libby and about anything like this, and it happened then. It's just this, like, horrible, like, kind of not horrible, but unsettling feeling in my body, and it's just like, I don't know how you cope with losing your child anyway, but in this manner. Um, it's just horrible. It's just horrible. Like, I I've never known anybody who has perished due to a crime. Uh, I have lost people in my life, but most of them were to illness, and it was horrific. But yeah, the only sort of sudden accident, or in one case, I guess murder in the sense, that I've ever been close to, has been pets, and it has been heartbreaking to go through that. So I can only imagine. Oh, hey, Casey Cakes, and oh, hey, TJ. I'd been wondering where you were. I haven't seen you for a little while. Nice to see you. So, Casey Cakes, let's see. The main killer continued to kill, responsible for other deaths. Potentially, Casey. I think, sorry, Casey Jakes. I called you Cakes. I got cake on my mind here. Yeah, I think potentially. I think, if we're dealing with an organized sadistic killer, the chances of another crime are high. But also, I've grappled with this, is it a one off? There could be a couple of reasons for that. Sometimes, not all sadistic killers are repeat offenders. It could, if it is more a mixture of sadistic organized crime and grievance, that might explain a one off. It's potential that there is, that there is links to other crimes. We don't know as well, because until someone's caught, we can't always link them back to other crimes if we take other sort of serial killers. But also, is there a possibility that this person has, cashed in, I suppose, whatever it is that they have to kind of get away with this crime in a way? So what I mean by that is, again, this is all speculation and alleging here, but did they have some special favor that helped them get away with this, but they're on advisal that if something else happens, that they're not going to get that cover again, and so they are actually laying low for that reason, possibly. I don't know. It's hard to know. That's a tricky one. Yeah. Yeah, TJ, I mean, absolutely, like what you're saying about like what certain people have said. um I think, yeah, there are some statements that just feel a little bit too close to what the crime scene looks like, don't they? Or to how the crime kind of unfolded. So yeah, it's definitely hard to reconcile how certain people maybe have more knowledge or have said things that seem more consistent with the crime, and certainly it's hard to reconcile how people have certain interests and um, activities that bear more resemblance to this crime too. Yeah, for sure. In terms of motive, TJ, we were talking about this earlier. It's hard to know. So often with an organized sadistic offender, there is no specific motive other than their own fantasy, their own sadism essentially, and their fantasy, like living out a fantasy that they have. But there can be the mixed cases where you've got sadism and some sort of personal element too. So it could be either. Yeah, for Jay, definitely. And I think we definitely know that there are court records that definitely support some of those things as well. So yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we were talking about that TJ retaliation. We were talking about whether that could be an element. I don't think it would be the only element. I just definitely think the sadistic element is there alongside any other element like retaliation. It's certainly a possibility. Yeah. Certainly what isn't a possibility is an impulsive sexual offense gone wrong. That the scene doesn't convey that, and even the offender profile still wouldn't convey that, because we don't see a 44-year-old man even committing a disorganized double homicide in the context of a failed sexual assault, right? Like, even finding a case like that is hard, let alone when we then include the sadistic elements as well. I'm going to finish up in a minute. I suppose just tying this back to the geofencing, and also Critter Mama has talked before about a fog data science. I always get this confused. Yes, it's fog data science. So let me just actually read. This is just from Wikipedia because I'm still getting my head around what fog data science is. But basically, fog data science is, let's see, so fog reveal is a tracking tool that aggregates location data from mobile apps. So it's kind of, from what I gather, like they can get all the information from the mobile apps to actually create kind of our own sort of geofencing data. Is that right, Critter Mama? Or am I like completely butchering that? I hate it if I'm butchering it. I'm so sorry. Oh, hey, Dom. Good to see you. I hadn't seen you for a while. Nice to see you. But yeah, so my understanding of the fog science data, I get them confused. Yeah, so I'm still getting my head around it completely. But yes, guys, look up. I'll pop Critter Mama's comment on the screen. Oh, hey, see-through. Hadn't seen you either. We missed you. Nice to see you. Yeah, look it up, guys, because I think it definitely is a point that could help, because essentially it's going to give you data about phone location in some regards. It's kind of similar to geofencing as far as I can understand. I got way too many like branches of things I'm trying to like get my head around at the moment. So I think I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so basically if we can get data about the phones in the area, in the geofence area, basically in that kind of space of the trails that day, even if it's anonymized, we can still find the pattern of movement. And it would be interesting to see if there is a pattern of movement with phones that just suddenly seem to go into aeroplane mode as they enter the vicinity of the area. It'd be interesting, of course, most importantly, to see what's going on with Rick's phone. It'd be interesting to see Libby's phone on the geofence data as well. Yeah, so like, there's lots of things that I think can be revealed by the phone data. I really, really hope that the defense team are able to have more analysts looking at that, because we can get so much data from that, even if it's not labeled as this is Rick's phone, this is so-and-so's phone. If you can get the overall pattern. So let's say, for example, I'm sitting here in an empty building because it's a Sunday and I'm at work. And, so you would see my phone pinging at the same spot because I've been sitting here for 2 hours while we do this live. And if something, God forbid, happens to me, if you're suddenly seeing a phone around the entrance that then just goes cold, and doesn't seem to then kind of go from the entrance to the car park or something, that would be suggestive that could be the offender. So, I mean, again, it'd be a lot of like looking at patterns and trying to understand, but I think it could give us more of a behavioral timeline of the various different phones in the area. We wouldn't necessarily be able to link it to specific people. However, I think with Critter Mama's suggestion, even if we didn't have stage 2, 3 geofencing, maybe this folk science data. I get the order wrong every time, Critter Mama. It's one of those ones like my head just doesn't stick with it. But yeah, that fog data would actually be able to, it's on the screen in front of me, fog science data would be able to actually potentially again reveal the identity of particular phones in the area. So I think this is key. I actually think this might be the key exonerating factor for Rick at trial. I think if they can get this information, I actually think this beyond anything could give him an alibi, and it could also plot out other potential offenders. So I think this is more key than anything else to me. I think that somebody needs to be looking at this digital data. And like I said, I'm putting my hands up. If anyone wants to slip me the GIF, don't leak data. No one should be leaking discovery. But gosh, I'd love to see that. I'd love to join the team to just look at that data and sit with highlighters and pieces of paper everywhere. And anyone wants to join me, we could do like this group deciphering of the different phones moving around that area that day, because I think that we'd see such interesting data there, and we'd really be able to get a much clearer view, not only of possible offenders, but also of the timelines of the people that we know are there, like Bree Wilbur and Riley Voorhees. It could really end this whole debate about timelines and who was seen at what time. Now, one of the things that when I started off today and talked about my kind of evolving idea around the car at the private drive, I mentioned something about 207, and this is a point I know of massive contention for probably most people in here, and people who think Rick is guilty and people who think Rick is innocent, because I have a different timeline to both of those groups. I do believe Rick was on the trails between 1 and 2. I do believe he sees Riley Voorhees. I don't believe he is the man that the girls see and say is Bridge Guy. So I'm going to just pull up my, before I do finish up today, I got a little bit longer to go. This went really quickly. Goodness, this is my longest live in a while. Thanks, guys. I was feeling a little bit like, this week. I was just tired, and I had literally, I think, just done too much of the crime scene stuff. So it was like, I just wasn't feeling my best. So I wasn't really sure even about doing the live today. I wanted to wrap my Christmas presents and try and just get into Christmas cheer. But I was like, no, I've got a few hours. I'm going to pick my boys up in an hour or so. And I was like, you know what, let's do this. And I won't have a chance to do this once the boys are home, because we're now the final week of, not the final week of lead up to Christmas, but the final week of school and the lead up to Christmas. And, I've got the elves to arrange. Gosh, guys, those bloody elves. I've got 10 more days of elves. So if you guys have got ideas for the elves, please let me know. I've got the elves to sort out. I've got presents to wrap. I've got teachers' gifts to prepare. So I was like, no, this is my time. I've got a few hours free now. I've got 3 hours, 4 hours free. Let's do it. So let me just pull this up. So this is the timeline that I have suggested. Now, I know, again, like I said, people don't love this timeline, but I really want you to see here, guys, that my timeline is not suggesting Rick is guilty at all. So my suggestion is he sees the girls around the 120 mark. Now, I will do a whole video explaining this again, and I will use Rick's own words and the interviews the first interview to explain why I think this again. We'll go over all of that in the next few weeks. That one's something I've been planning to do for a while, but based on what Rick says, I do truly believe he sees Riley Voorhees, but I think he sees them as they're heading back towards the Mears area. So I think he sees them actually on the 501, not later down near Freedom Bridge. And Bree herself says she sees 1 or 2 people on the way back from the bridge. So that suggests they don't just see Bridge Guy. I just don't think that they would really notice Rick Allen, because they're obviously, the fact that he calls them weird, they're taking selfies. We've seen some of the pictures that day. They're being funny and loud and silly like teenage girls are, and they're having fun. And I don't think they're then really tracking a man that, could be their dad walking by, right? Whereas they do track Bridge Guy because he has an air about him that feels more suspicious. Whereas I don't think Rick would really kind of, activate your spidey senses so much. So Bree definitely says she sees 2 people. See-through, I know we're going to talk about this, right? Because I know see-through thinks differently to me around where he sees the girls. We'll talk about this, guys, because I feel like there's some gold in that interview of things that he says. I think that he mentions a few things that to me really clarify his timeline. So we will do this. I'm just touching on it very briefly today. I know I keep promising to do it, but I will see through. Look for the live when I have a live that says looking at the timeline again and looking at the interview and stuff like that, because we will do that. But yeah, I'm with you, Anna Lisette. He's small. He's wearing kind of muted clothing. Teenage girls are not going to take much interest in a man that is kind of their dad's age, that isn't really imposing, that doesn't have a really kind of sort of scary aura about him. He's a meek, mild, small man. Okay. And Bree does say that she sees more than one person as they're heading back from the bridge. And he does say that he crosses paths with them and they're walking, like they literally intersect with each other. They're not kind of walking in line with each other or parallel or anything like that. And he says they're coming off the trail, heading back to where the cars were parked. Well, the cars were parked at the Mears entrance. The cars were not parked anywhere near the Freedom Bridge. There were no cars parked there. If he parked at the CPS, which I do believe, again, unpopular opinion, but I can explain it and have, and I can continue to, but he said there's no cars parked there either. There was no new car park near the Freedom Bridge. You know, he's not going to know whether there's cars parked over near Old Camden Road if he didn't park there, but if he did park there, there's no cars parked there either. So where is the car, like where are the cars parked? He said they're coming off the trails, probably headed back to where the cars parked. There's more to it. Like I can't remember the exact words, but I've analyzed it. I've popped it into ChatGPT to be like, how do you read it? It is really poorly worded. Like, don't get me wrong. No offense to Rick. I mean, I'm poorly worded a lot of the time too when you're just thinking off the top of your head. But yeah, I get the sense he's only ever talking about cars at the Mears. Dom, I'm not sure about Ricci actually. That's not an angle that I've looked at super significantly. I mean, Ricci talks about Kegan Kline and Ron Logan. I don't believe particularly Kegan Kline is involved. I don't really think Ron Logan is either. I don't know so much about Ron Logan, but Kegan Kline I definitely don't believe is involved in any way. Again, not standing up for Kegan Kline. He's certainly involved in in a lot of other terrible offences, and that's a separate issue. But I think that maybe again Ricci's been fed stuff. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like people. I definitely believe that there's been various ways that there have been attempts to misdirect people's ideas, right? And so I think that maybe Ricci was important for that. I don't believe I don't believe he's lying about it. I don't know that he'd have any particular reason to lie, but I wonder if he's been fed something or some story in order to, to like, I don't know, misdirect things. But yes, Kegan Kline is 100% is not somebody who has made good decisions in his life. He's perpetrated terrible crimes and he is serving time for those, but I don't believe that he is the profile of this offender. I don't believe he's involved. Yeah. But again, open to everybody's opinions there. So if we go by the timeline that I have, he also talks about sitting on the bench and he says that as he's leaving, he sees the two cars parked. Now, that would be 1:49. So when you time that, it means he's back at his car by about 2:00. Now, if we also look at the sightings of the small black car or dark car at the CPS, they seem to always occur between 1 and 2:00. Right? There is this Wesley McWhirter that's really weirdly worded in the PCA and in the documents that we've looked at before that see-through found for us about the cars and things that suggests that there's a to me, it seems like there's this sort of deliberately evasive kind of description about what Wesley McWhirter saw when. I don't think Wesley McWhirter is being dishonest, of course not. There's no reason for him to, but I think the way that it's worded suggests Wesley McWhirter does see a car parked at the CPS, and then they say he's seen leaving the the place where he worked, which is the Hoosier Harvest store at I think, what is it, 228 or something, something like that. But I don't think they're related. I think the Wesley McWhirter could have seen that car another time. I just think that there's a bit of a ambiguity there. Now, is it just poor wording? Possibly. But if Wesley McWhirter saw a car that looked like Rick Allen's, a small black car, oh yes, absolutely, Heavy. Please post CN's link for sure. Anyone who wants to post links, as long as they're nothing mean, which I know that's not for you, CN. I just read in passing what you were saying. Yeah, feel free. You can post people's channels as well. So I think my theory on that is that Wesley McWhirter, I don't know, whether he drives around as part of his job for the Hoosier Harvest or if he might have gone out to get lunch. Had he seen that car at another point? I don't think he saw the car at 228, because if he did, I really feel as though there's no reason at all that the prosecution, that the state wouldn't have made a big deal of that, because that would suggest then that Rick Allen's car is parked there right in the crime window. How could Rick explain that, right? I mean, other than that he was still sitting on the 505 bench. I mean, yeah, is that a possibility? I guess perhaps, maybe he sees the two cars parked at the Mears when the girls are being dropped off as he's walking to the 505. But no, actually he couldn't, because then he would have passed Betsy Blair. So no, I feel Rick left it. Really feel Rick left at about 2:00, which is interesting when you put into context of 2:07-ish being the time where we see a car going in the private drive and coming out, and that's a time where Bridge Grime most likely starts to cross the bridge as well from the north side. So I wonder if that car at the old CPS kind of area on the road sees Rick leave and gives the all okay. They all pop their phones into aeroplane mode or whatever, and then things start to get into action. And this is why, again, I so would love to see if there's any indicator on the geofencing of phones snapping into aeroplane mode around that time as well. I mean, look, I'm reaching here. I don't have the data to support this. I'm just going on what intuitively makes sense. And I know I talk about not just relying on intuition and theories too much, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow ourselves to be intuitive. I'm just saying if there's facts that debunk our intuition or our common sense reasoning, that's where we probably have to let go of it. So yeah, for sure. Like if somebody says to me, well, no, Rick's phone didn't leave at that time, it was, on and off at somewhere else, whatever, like I would absolutely drop this. But I think it makes sense. So thanks everybody for all your contributions today. It was a great chat. Like it was so nice to see a lot of you guys. I haven't seen some of you for a while. And yes, digital. I agree. That makes sense, doesn't it? I think it could be part of the plan. And here's CN's blog. I'm definitely going to take a look. And look at Hebby in the picture. She's with the Grinch. Such a cute picture. I love it. Hey, Dennis McKean. Sorry, we're about to finish up, but please catch the replay. This has been a lot all over the place. It's been more of a conversation. I know I put Q&A, crime scene offender characteristics. I'll change the title of the video because that's not what we're talking about really as much today. A little bit, but not so much. But yeah, by all means, like I know we've kind of skipped around a lot of different things. If there's any angles from today that you are more interested in knowing more about, always comment below, because I'm constantly coming up with different video ideas and I'm always happy to be directed in an area like that you're interested in. I sometimes won't take those ideas on board if I feel like they're not something I'm really qualified or not qualified, like I'm not really felt I've researched enough or understand enough. So please don't think I'm just ignoring, but there are some angles that I struggle with. So I don't follow them, or I don't follow them immediately. But also, and then there's some angles that I probably won't follow because, they just don't go in line with my theory either. So it's not that I wouldn't follow them because I don't like things that are at odds with my theory. But if I feel like, well, I've already kind of like crossed that off with my research, and I possibly won't go into it. But most of the time I'm happy to talk about most things. Yeah, I really always hope that you guys don't see me as biased. I do overwhelmingly get some really positive feedback for my videos from you guys and great comments and discussions. I do sometimes get repeats of kind of, I guess, repeated kind of comments around um, kind of just, again, dismissing things that we've sort of deep dived in our lives. And as again, all opinions are welcome, but I really always would love it if people actually kind of fully like listen in good faith. And then if you disagree, like definitely let me know why, and that's fine. But I think it's just it gets a little bit exhausting sometimes when I have people who maybe don't listen to the video and just disagree, and that's fine if you don't want to listen to the video. But I think it's like then I'm like, but I'm repeating what's in the video again in the comments. So apologies, I don't mean to like be negative about people who are engaging with the videos, but I'm probably not going to respond if a comment is answered in the video itself, because it can feel a bit tiring to do that, if I'm honest. I try to respond to everyone, but I think it's taking a lot out of me, and then it's stopping me from actually creating more content, and it kind of pulls me off track. So I don't want to police people. I don't like to have to tell people what they can and can't say in the comments, but I do need people to try to engage in good faith. You can disagree. Please back up why you disagree. Please try not to do the sort of hand wave, no, that's not true, without at least, I guess, some backup behind it. And also, let's try and always be respectful in how we speak to each other. I always try to do that myself as well. So, yeah. So Criminal Network, I'm going to check out all your stuff. It sounds really interesting. I'm also really interested in the JonBenet Ramsey case. So I'd love to know what your take is on that. Oh, thanks, Ian. Oh, that's really kind. Probably some of the way that I engage is going to shift a little bit over time, more and more, as we've seen. Like, I've definitely started to get a bit more confident, which I think is a good thing, because it helps me to convey my ideas in a more, I don't know, in a more confident way, I suppose. But I also am probably going to engage a little bit differently in terms of comments and responses, maybe be a little tighter on moderation as well, because I feel like I want to keep this community respectful and fair. And it's getting bigger too, guys. I mean, we're nearly at 1.1K. I think that we probably will be there by the end of today if I go by how the numbers rise after our videos are released. So I'm looking forward to seeing us go beyond the 1K mark, and hopefully up to the 2K over time as well. And I don't do this purely for subscribers. I do this to try and advocate for Abby and Libby and Rick. But obviously, it's lovely to get that validation, and also the more subscribers, likes, views, comments on my videos, the more that the algorithm pushes them to more people, which means that more people hear about this case, and more people think about this case and notice, what's going on. Because people like me, I mean, I wouldn't have known that there are so many cases like this. I would never have guessed that this could happen, that we could have such a biased system where an innocent man has sat convicted of a crime that it's almost impossible that he did for so long. So this has really opened my eyes and probably opened up a new career pathway for me. I will always be a therapist. I love therapy, but I really feel like moving on from this, I'd like to join some type of innocence project work, because I know Rick is not the only one who has been in a predicament like this, and I really would love to be able to provide some of the things that I know that I do well to other cases or other defense groups, or whoever. So if anyone's out there and wants a set of eyes on a case from a psychology and science informed perspective with lots of layered pattern recognition thinking, let me know, because that's my area that I like to work on. So anyway, that was a big babble at the end of the video, but thanks, guys. I just honestly can't say it enough. Super appreciative of everybody in here. Please do like, subscribe, comment, guys. Even if you've been here in the chat, please comment. It does help the algorithm. the videos are doing really well on the algorithm. Some of my colleagues have said that I'm coming up as suggested videos for them, which is kind of exciting. But yeah, the more engagement with every video, the more views, the more view time, all of that stuff does feed the algorithm. So if you are clicking on the video, watch it for a few minutes, because that helps. Average view time helps. There's so many different indicators that I didn't even know about until I started doing this more seriously. So would really appreciate all of that support too. Okay, anyway, guys, love to see you all. Have a lovely rest of the weekend, and I'll update you guys with some elf antics probably later today, because I've got to get the elves into action now the boys are back from their weekend away. So watch this space. Bye, guys.